All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the basement. I am Eli, and this is Elfbait. So, getting the stream going this morning. Looks like right now the uh, system is showing 0 people watching. So, that's awesome. Although I know I've had a Mechhead Studios, hey Jason, and Echo show up. So I'm assuming you're still lurking there. Now it's showing 2, so it just takes a moment to load um, to feed in there. So what are we talking about today? Well, if you read the headline, I'm going to be talking about role playing in the Alien universe. Hey, mages, how's it going? This is another sci-fi stream, so maybe a bit out of your wheelhouse there, but thank you for showing up. So real quick, let me get this out of the way by saying that this is not about any particular um, version of the Aliens role playing game. I know there's the Leading Edge and now there's the Free League one. Um, but this is more about playing in the universe and ways to play in it. Um, because that can seem like sort of a Halakar, how's it going? Welcome and Reactionary Principle Gaming with Mr. Max Belvin. I'll just call you Max because that's a mouthful. Hey, Max, thanks for coming by. Yeah, so the Aliens universe is one of those ones that is compelling to want to play in, but can sometimes feel like sort of a one-trick pony. Um, no, Echo constantly saying Bill Paxton Lyons is not frowned on. He was taken from us too soon. Um, and so that is totally welcome. Squirrel Hermit, thank you. I will be anybody's excuse to procrastinate, mages. Certainly, there are worse reasons. I almost didn't have a stream today because as I got up from my desk to go attend to some stuff pre-stream, I yanked the cord of my headset. It actually bent the connector for the USB, and it still works though, fortunately. So hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. And there's Mr. Geek and Zetarock. Welcome, welcome. Dungeon Master character died just in time. Alrighty. So, whether you're so the Aliens universe, or Alien universe, uh, it has been around for a good long time. I watched it for the first time, watched Alien for the first time when I was 8. It is imprinted on my childhood, like any good, honest child of the 80s. It's part of me there. Shadow, hey, welcome, and General Nut, welcome, welcome. All right, so Alien, great spooky monster film, classic, an amazing film, and then Aliens, uh, probably one of the most worthy sequels in history. Um, and while it is definitely a flavor change and a tonal change from the first movie, I think that's one of the reasons that it's so great is that it feeds perfectly. It dovetails perfectly into that one. It gives you a 1-2 punch of 2 different flavors told in the same universe, and it is really right there where um, we see how flexible the Alien universe is given the right kind of storytelling and direction. Um, you're absolutely correct, Geek. Sigourney Weaver nailed it. And yes, the xenomorph. Although I have learned recently that in the aliens parlance, um, xenomorph with a capital X is referring to the xenomorph or the alien itself, and then xenomorph with a lowercase x is all the other aliens they've run into. Because if you've watched Aliens, and there's hints at it in the first Alien movie. Hey, Gene, welcome. Um, there is there are suggestions that they have encountered with other aliens and even interacted with them. Some of the banter between the Marines and the fact that there are already protocols in place for alien encounters and stuff. So it's definitely a lived-in universe and a populous universe, even though it may not be a Star Wars or some other galaxy where you have tons of people cruising around. Let's see, best horror movies that still stands up. Uh, yeah, it cannot be overstated just how well the dude in the suit works in that movie. I think that just goes down to the craftsmanship and the care that was put in by O'Bannon and the rest of his crew on working with what they had and knowing the limitations of what they had um, and just making it work. All right. So I did not put a delay on any of the comments, so I may actually not respond to everything except for just a moment. Uh, let's see. You know, growing up, Aliens is one of those ones that's contentious with Alien fans, and I think it comes down to whether you wanted a sequel to be another haunted house monster movie or if you felt that um, the universe had more to offer and could tell other stories within that universe. And I think that's been proven over time, um, especially if you expand into the Dark Horse comics, that even with the xenomorph itself as the central beastie, there is a lot um, of there's a lot to be told. There's a lot of variations, and the xenomorph is a excellent vehicle um, to tell other stories. To much like any other genre, you can tell a number of different stories using that as just sort of your your uh, your plot hook. And yeah, this is it. I like them both because they are two different things. I like that they both tell a story um, in a universe, and that the second expands on the first one without trying to be the first one. Um, and I think that's important. Let's see. So I guess we got 12 people here. I think that is actually a stream record for me. I may or may not be wrong. I haven't got to the point where I'm keeping track of that. So real quick, I'm just going to pull up some images as I talk to kind of, put something on the screen other than myself. But so we've already talked about Alien, and this is the original movie poster, which was a little deceptive, but I think very much, uh, was a nice hint at what we got without giving too much away. And then we have Aliens. So these are the two. There are many more. Some better, some worse. Some fit better, some don't fit at all. But I think one thing that I will say about all of the Alien movies, including the prequels, is that all of them have something to offer um, that was cool and usable in the context of a role playing experience. And that's what we're here to talk about, not the history of the movies or anything like that. All right. So, where we go. So, really, when it comes down to it, uh, with Alien movies or with Aliens RPG games, whether that's Free League or Leading Edge or something you homebrew. I mean, that's what I did back in the day. Actually, before there was an official game. Well, actually, it's not true. There was an official game. I just didn't want to play the Leading Edge one. So I cobbled it up for the West End Games D6 system that had come out for Star Wars. So why? Why do you want to play in a Alien universe? There's a couple of reasons. It's an evocative universe, as I mentioned already. There's just a lot to it. It's heavy with style. It's heavy with some very solid themes that you can use for a number of reasons, and a lot of the heavy lifting has already been done for you. Um, you don't have to build a lot of universe because we now have decades of expanded universe stuff written for it that you can cherry pick. There is official information out there, whether in the game books or in the various media that comes out in association with the films. Uh, yes, I've seen the director's cut. That was that I prefer the director's cut. Um, just because it gives more to look at. There are some scenes I think that are not necessary. I do feel that the whole starting bit with Newt's family, while it's neat to see, um, doesn't need to be shown to understand what's going on. I do think that the um, sentry gun scene and the revelation of Ripley's daughter are both very important because they do the sentry gun scene sets a bit of the tension and builds on the aliens' thought processes, the xenomorphs' thought processes, and the scene with Ripley's revealing Ripley's daughter ups the stakes and really helps to frame her relationship with Newt. Now, neither are necessary for the movie to work. I mean, the movie was was great and became a classic based on the original cut, the theatrical cut. But I think the director's cut does a little bit more. And just a heads up, you may hear my dog barking. He's alone in the living room and doesn't like it. So, uh, fortunately, the basement is between me and him. The basement ceiling. All right, so those are the whys. I think it's important when you're playing Alien in the Alien universe to then kind of decide upfront how you are going to how you're going to run your campaign, and you really have two decisions to make. You can either make it all completely revolve around the xenomorph and xenomorph stories, um, which I think is best done using um, in the free league system. They have the cinematic rules, or which are very much kind of gritty, hardcore one shots. I think if you're going to go with a xenomorph centric campaign, it's probably best to play that way because then you can jump around between characters and settings, and it makes sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me unless you're maybe running a like a Colonial Marines campaign or a corporate campaign where you are specifically looking for and dealing with xenomorphs. It doesn't make a lot of sense to have the same people constantly running into xenomorphs all the time. Um, in the xenomorph with the big X. Um, or you can run it like any other kind of gritty space trucker, cyberpunky sci-fi setting, and that works, I think, better for campaign play because your characters can do other things besides necessarily run into the xenomorph. And I can say from personal experience, you can run a happy and healthy campaign without ever having the xenomorph, just by paying attention to what is in the universe already. Uh, Definitely rooted sensibly to what I've known technology wise. Sure, it's sci-fi, yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, of course, there's that whole discussion between why the stuff in Prometheus and uh, God, I can never remember Covenant um, look so much more advanced than they do in Aliens, and any of the other ones. Besides the fact that they're made so far apart, I think you can come up with uh, just some good justification universe wise. Um, you know, slick corporate high end technology versus um, reliable, simple, useful, easily repairable in isolation analog technologies. Um, but yeah, that's a whole other can of worms there. So once you decided how you're going to run your campaign, um, you really need to think about what kind of stories you're going to be telling and how you want to tell those stories. Um, the uh, uh, if you're going to be doing your xenomorph centric game, then it just comes down to coming up with interesting settings and scenarios to put the xenomorph in. I've been writing a few up for the new Free League rules. Um, and I think you can take any scenario that you would normally run in another science fiction high tech game and then find a way to plug a xenomorph into it. I think those work the best because um, they're the alien movies often frame themselves around people not going into a situation and expecting to deal with the xenomorph. So, for example, I've got one scenario I did which occurs on a colony during a prisoner transfer. There's a local uh, labor activist who's been causing problems in the mining colony, and they're getting ready to offload him. And the shuttle landing pad gets sabotaged um, to keep basically his people sabotage it. It causes some damage, puts some limitations on the colony, um, but at that point also the shuttle coming down um, has has a xenomorph on it, and so and then I've got another one which is two crews of two different ships that are that find themselves on the same space hulk for different reasons, and they then run into a xenomorph. I mean, that's how all of these things go, right? You're walking down the street and you hear a noise in the alley, and you think it's a cat or a homeless person, and no, it's a xenomorph. You're going to Chuck E. Cheese, and you hear some strange noises in the back, and it's not just some mechanic guy; it's a xenomorph. I mean, anything plus xenomorph equals an alien movie, right? I mean, so I think that's. I mean, you could, and hear me out here. You could run Friday the 13th, but with a xenomorph. Bunch of kids are out at the summer camp. You know, they're doing their thing. You know, one of the characters wanders off to take a leak or find their weed or goes out to get some beer from the truck. Weird egg. Hey, what's that? Xenomorph. Or if you wanted to get creative, they're out there doing their thing, and we already see in a prequel scene a bear finding an egg in the forest and getting a face hugger, and then we all know as the audience where that's going, and then the story is now a bear xenomorph if you're going with the borrowed biology aspects that they've now kind of pretty much firmly implanted into the xenomorph biology, going after the kids at the camp. You could do it. I think the Predator franchise is also good at showing this. The first Predator is a war story. The second Predator is still a war story, but it's in a different environment with different characters. Cocaine Bear Xenomorph. I wasn't even thinking of that, but you're right. We could mash those two up, and it's now instead of a bear finding a duffel bag full of cocaine that was thrown out of an airplane, which is where that story comes from in real life. Um, he finds an alien egg in the woods, and now we have alien bear, cocaine xenomorph. I mean, who knows? Do we really need a cocaine xenomorph? Does anybody want a cocaine xenomorph? Does anybody want a xenomorph? But neither here nor there. So, you, if you're doing that episodic play and everything is a xenomorph, really easy to just come up with the xenomorph scenarios because you just have to find the situation that you want to plug the xenomorph into. Um, you know, the comics and the books and the movies give you plenty of useful uh, hooks. And yes, that would be comedy gold. And unfortunately, too many of the later Alien and Predator movies are more in the comedy gold uh, department than actual good movies. So, then I guess if you're looking, what I was saying is the books and stuff have given you lots of different things to work with between the experimentation, the corporate meddling, the intentional use and abuse of the people in corporate space to meet the corporations ends. And it's not just Weyland Yutani. There are plenty of corporations that are mentioned in there. I know Seegson is sort of a competitor that's mentioned in Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation is a good example of how to expand um, how to expand on that alien concept without having it always be a xenomorph. Because in the if you've ever, I've not played Isolation, but I've watched a full playthrough. I don't have a system that'll do it, nor do I have time. But in there, we've got infighting between people on the station. We've got marshals. We've got rogue synthetics. We've got just general hazards, and then we've got one alien on. I think on the whole station. Uh, Alien 3. Um, yeah, I mean, Alien 3 is. I think Alien 3 is good enough to still be included, even though it's problematic. There is just enough in there to know and like. Um, I do like knowing. I find it even more interesting knowing some of the places that it borrowed its DNA from. Um, like the whole story of the whole monastic element in there um, is from a story that involved actual monks and not just prisoners with sort of their own religious order. All right, so that's if you're going to do the xenocentric. Now, if you're going to play it like any other sort of game, you have to figure out what that sort of game is. And so I think one of the obvious choices, well, there are two obvious choices for me. There's the space truckers. Um, yeah. Um, it wasn't a giant wooden raft on a water world. It was even more ridiculous. It was a planet made of wood in space, like an artificial planet or made of wood. It was so dumb. But they were going for way too high end sci-fi. Um, let's see. Dark Ages Xenomorph. So there is. It wasn't in Dark Ages. As far as I understand it, the story where they got the monks from um, was, and I can't remember where I heard this. Um, so don't ask me for a source. But as far as I understand it, it was still going to be sort of an actiony movie, but it took place on some backwater world where there was an actual monastery. Like I don't know, it was Benedictine or whatever monks, and the main character would not have been Sigourney Weaver or anything like that. The main character was a deserter from the U.S. CMC um, who had just kind of wandered to the monastery and you know taken on the cloth and was there. And so then the alien shows up at the monastery, and it had this underlying tone of penance and how he's like, is this, this is my demon. And of course we get that it culminates in that action shot of him going to the room where they put everybody's worldly possessions that they came to the monastery with. And of course he's got his marine tack gear there, and he's just like, okay, cool, well, now I'm going to fight the alien. That is how I heard it ages ago, but it's been so long. And then, of course, there's the William Gibson script, which is now available as an audio play and a comic from Dark Horse, which is cool. I love that Dark Horse is doing comic versions or graphic novel versions of original scripts and screenplays. Like if you've ever picked up the Star Wars that they did, that was them doing the comic for Lucas's original vision of Star Wars, and they've done now the original Alien and um, Alien 3 as um, as novelizations or graphic novelizations. So it's kind of cool. Um, but yeah, so there is actually, I think, in some of the Dark Horse comics. Speaking of Dark Age Xenomorphs, there are some. They've put the Xenomorph in a number of different time frames, just like they did the Predator. And I'm pretty sure there is one that has a kid in a Middle Ages setting with a spear. That might it's hard to I get the ones that are Predator and the ones that are Alien mixed up because it's been a while. Um, let's see. Yeah, we're not going to go into this. That was just such a dumb comment, but um, yeah. All right. So if you're gonna run it, if you're gonna run the game as an ongoing campaign, it's best to pick um, a framework that can tell a number of different stories and interesting stories between when you may or may not have a xenomorph show up. Um, and the two obvious ones are just space truckers, kind of like what you saw in Alien, or a military campaign. So whether that's colonial marines or corporate soldiers or mercenaries like you have in Alien 4, um, you know, something where you can justify doing stuff between xenomorph encounters. Uh, yeah, they've done the alien I think they've done more historical settings with the Predator than they have with the Alien. Um, but with the xenomorph. But yeah, there's always awesome dioramas out there. It's crazy. I heard a great pitch recently for doing a Predator movie set in um, feudal Japan. That would just be amazing. Maybe we'll get that now that they did Prey, because Prey was good. I liked Prey. All right. So, what stories are you going to tell? I have. I mentioned earlier I made a West End Games conversion for Alien, and I ran 6 long sessions with a few adventures in that game, and never had a xenomorph show up, but we still had plenty of action. Um, uh, Honestly, as long as the writer uh, decided to have her live, because they ultimately are fictional characters. So, um, and so in my campaign, I ran an investigation of a space Hulk, um, and not space Hulk in the classic, you know, Warhammer sense, but a floating Hulk of a ship. Um, and they did run into a xenomorph with the lowercase x. There was an alien life form on board. Um, that is probably one of my big claims to fame as a GM, in that I built enough tension somehow in that game to get my players so on edge that they actually ended up fragging accidentally their lieutenant. I should mention that this was done as a Colonial Marines campaign. Let's see, and so that was one adventure I ran in that. I had them tracking down a corporate defector who had stolen a super weapon, and that one was sort of an urban adventure. The weapon in that game, I think I had made up what's called a throttle gun, and it was some sort of a like high energy rail gun kind of a weapon that was making it really dangerous for the Marines, despite all their hardware and stuff. Um, let's see. All right, and so, sorry, I'm trying to keep up with the comments and getting lost here. I also had them investigate a horticultural research outpost and sort of paid an homage to Day of the Triffids, where they ran into mutant plants that had been created through mad science. Um, and then I had done a several several sessions game of um, sort of a peacekeeping mission on a world that was in the middle of a labor war. Basically, armed labor activists fighting corporate troops. USCMC was sent in to kind of quell it because things were happening, and then that was the scenario, and I just kind of let it go from there. And the Marine players decided to take an interesting angle on it, and ended up stepping in and brokering a deal and peace negotiation between both sides, which was kind of fun. 14 people watching. Hey, cool. So yeah, that's my experience running a campaign. I mean, you could, and I mentioned earlier some of the scenarios I came up with for what kind of one-shot plays. Um, there are, I think, a lot of places to draw good inspiration from, and I've actually kind of keyed up a few of these in categories. Um, but before I do, I will field questions from the chat if you have any specific questions or things that you're kind of wondering about when it comes to either how to run an alien game or ways to facilitate things in the setting. Uh, they were not vegetarian xenomorphs. They were plants. Let's see. Oh, a question. We had when we ran xenomorph types, creatures, stuff. Could they gestate in the synthetics from the alien movies? According to Dark Horse Comics, yes. One of the early comics that Dark Horse did has a squad of Marines going into an alien hive, only for them to be revealed to be advanced synthetics that so perfectly mimicked um, biology that the aliens themselves couldn't tell, and they themselves didn't even know that they were synthetics. Um, which is interesting now that we know that Blade Runner and Alien are officially in the same universe, and that the Tyrell Corporation and its replicants existed um, as contemporaries to synthetics. Because you could make a play that maybe Wayland Yutani uh, was using uh, replicants in that case instead of synthetics. But yeah, at least the writers of Dark Horse thought that it was a good scenario and good enough case, and I could see it because synthetics can be built however you want. So let's see, let's see. Yeah, I think plants are one of those ones that is kind of an underrated bad guy. Um, I know that occasionally we get a good one. I think if you've ever seen The Ruins, I love that movie. It's creepy and Lovecraftian. Um, so Aliens versus Cthulhu. There we go. That's what we need as a Dark Horse comic. So um, let's see. Going from there. Um, let's see. I know that they've in the comics and the movies and the books, they've expanded on the xenomorphs quite a bit. I know that there's the part of the Alien Earth War storyline. They had the one general who thought he had managed to um, program and control some aliens, some xenomorphs uh, to much to his dismay, he was not able to. There's a great picture of um, either some Marines or corporate troops coming out of a transport with some harnessed aliens, where they've got like a an optics panel over the front of the alien's head and some sort of control rig, and the aliens are sort of on are wired up. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool how they've expanded on it. And again, if you're talking about role playing games, it gives you a lot to work with. Um, I don't know if there's an alien skull on the shelf in Andor. I think that's I can't confirm or deny that. I know that there's one in Predator 2, which if that prop still exists, then maybe they did. But they are both 20th Century Fox properties and have now both Disney properties. So who knows? I didn't notice it. Let's see. Okay, so all right. So I'm gonna keep watching the chat and address questions as they come in. I'm gonna go ahead and look at some inspiration that you can use. I mentioned uh, the throttle gun scenario. That was actually vaguely inspired by the movie Runaway. If you've ever seen this movie, no, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but the way the guns in there worked was sort of what I based the throttle gun off of. But this movie is in one of those categories. There's a lot of movies that actually fit into this that I think you can really use, and that's like technology out of control or invasive alien tech, synthetics, replicants, whatever. Because we have Runaway, and of course, then there's Blade Runner. You could run Blade Runner um, beat for beat in the as an alien setting. Um, all you need is a environment where you have a synthetic or a replicant. That needs to be hunted down, tracked down. Combine this with Outland, and I didn't even pull up Outland in my videos, but I mean, honestly, want to talk about the first movie I've ever watched that to me just is in the Alien universe, even though it's never officially said that it is Outland. That is, I find it. I don't think it's any mistake that when they did the Marshals for Alien Isolation, that they bear a bit of a resemblance to the Marshals in Outland. They're not one for one, but just the use of the term Marshal, um, the fact that they went with like a blue uniform instead of like a very militant black, cop kind of a uniform or anything like that. Outland is perfectly an alien scenario without aliens, without xenomorphs. Um, uh, I don't. Outland is one of those ones that it's best for what it is. I think it would have lost everything if we kept seeing that that same character doing cop stuff. Not to mention the way that the movie is framed. He's pretty much done when he finishes that movie. But I mean, now a gritty cop show set in some sort of outer space colony could be fun, or even going from place to place could be cool. But and that could be your campaign. Again, if you're Marshals would be a good campaign in the Aliens universe, because you could go through doing all sorts of criminal investigations, and prisoner transports, things like that. And at any point, a xenomorph could show up, but along the way, you're going to be fighting criminals and corporate scum and whatever other bugs or technology shows up on the way. Um, but yeah, I think Outland is one of those ones. So continuing on for inspiring films, um, this is one that may seem a little weird, but Hardware. If you've ever seen it, yeah, Space Cop show could be a really sick series. You're right. It's and it could get really silly real quick too, and it has. I mean, but it depends on how you play it. I think if you were to play it as a serious cop show, uh, instead of like an '80s TV police procedural, it could be good. Like if you did a True Detective kind of level of story across a long season set in a sci-fi setting, even the alien setting, whatever, it could be amazing. Um, let's see. Uh, blue wasn't necessarily the standard police color back then because it depends on the city you're in. I mean, there's plenty of cities in the U.S. where blue has not been a uniform color for a long time. Um, I know, and of course, it comes down to what shade of blue. But my point is that it's when isolation was made, it has been long established enough that Outland is sort of considered the unofficial Alien movie that I can't help but think that the creators intentionally made a nod there. Yeah, Hardware is an underrated film. If you're not familiar with Hardware, it is basically it's a movie where a piece of salvage technology causes problems, and so this could play out a number of ways. You could go with Hardware, um, almost play for play. You could have some backwater planet where a piece of military hardware ends up in the hands of some regular person, and then machines of death and destruction. Um, so that said, you could also play it on the biological side of things and say that you know what happens when some backworld biotech biotech scientist or dabbler or even a criminal chemist or whatever gets a hold of some corporate xeno research. Um, a good example, I mean, Dark Horse came up with that with a pretty cool concept in the Xenozip. Um, I don't know if you haven't read the Dark Horse comics, that may be foreign, but it was they decided that they came up with this plot line where the royal jelly produced by the alien queen could be used as a performance enhancing drug, kind of combat drug, pep pill kind of a thing. And um, they ran out of the jelly that they got from their original queen and started synthesizing it, and it went really wrong and made Marines freak out and tear people's heads off, and it was interesting. Yeah, Hardware has got a lot going for it. The Ministry soundtrack is good as well. Yeah, I agree here. Space Precinct, we don't need a remake of that, but I think we live in a day where there are some good writers and some good and people willing to take a chance on programming to where we could end up with a really good, solid space police show. But that would, kind of back to the point, that would make a great alien setting, alien campaign. Of course, this always doubles back to the question of why am I playing Alien if I'm not putting the alien in there? Um, and that's a fair point. But at the same, like why am I not playing Traveler, or why am I not playing Star Wars or Star Frontiers or any of these other science fiction games that are out there? And why am I not just playing those and not even having, putting up the pretense that this is an alien setting? And the answer to that is because you want to play in the aliens universe. I also think that if you're playing in the aliens universe, your players are constantly going to be wondering, is the next adventure the one where they all run into that nightmare encounter? Um, yes, there are. And Hollywood is not the only source for writers. And Hollywood does produce some stuff. I think honestly, people are maybe way too critical on films nowadays. Everybody is like an expert critic nowadays. There's such a thing as good enough. There's such a thing as fun but not great. There is bad stuff, and I think a lot of people think that that some works coming out of Hollywood are bad for reasons that may be questionable. But I'm not going to go into that. That's not what I'm here for. Let's see. Here we go. To what extent do the xenomorphs take on the characteristics of the host? So, um, Saturn 3 is another good one that you could actually pull for an alien universe setting. Um, this depends on where in the history of the game, or not the game, but the IP that you pull from. Up until Alien 3, um, it was never canonized that they borrowed from their hosts. And then that was kind of up in the air. The action figures were, as far as I understand it, one of the first places to kind of play around with that. Um, there are some elements in the comics that, of course, you know, refute this. You know, one of the original AVP comic, which was a much better story, and had they actually made the movie based on that comic and actually kept to the story of that comic, it would have been an amazing movie instead of a mediocre movie, because it would have been in the Aliens timeline, like the time period of Alien and Aliens, but also it's just a better story. But in that comic, the alien, the xenomorphs gestate in giant rhinos, alien rhinos called a Rinth, and they still come out human. There have been some novelizations that try to tie in what we've seen revealed in Prometheus through to backtrack through the threads of the various films to make them make sense. And I think one of the stories, I can't remember that. I think it's Cold Forge is the one that does that. Is the novel. I haven't read Cold Forge, but I've done some research in my, like a lot of gamers, I go through and pour over lots and lots of notes about things. I think it's Cold Forge. They sort of try to retroactively write in that the facehugger is not a delivery vessel for an alien embryo, but more a delivery mechanism for the what do they call it? The damn it, what's the term they use for the in Prometheus, and for the black goo? I can't remember what they call it, but basically the contagion, the pathogen is the word they use. Yeah, so they try to write it in that now what the facehugger is doing is delivering the pathogen to the host, and then that genetic nonsense is happening, and then that's how we get the hybridizations. You are correct. Not every D&D game does have to have a dungeon or a dragon. And welcome, Gene. Let's see. Oh, personality. So, as written in most of the source material, personalities are gone. The only time that they've ever written in, well, it's not true, because like I know like the bull alien and the crocodile aliens that they've had were much more like aggressive, testosterone filled kind of aggro beasts. And some of the tactics that they've shown in some of the expanded weirdness certainly affect them. But as far as personalities go, the only time that they've ever written in any of the media that I know of, a personality having an effect, um, was in one of the stories where they had the Pred alien, and the Pred alien came out not with the motivations of a xenomorph trying to build the hive and propagate the species. Hey, Bishop, welcome. How fitting. We're talking about Alien, and you are Bishop. Hopefully, you don't get ripped in half and put in a plastic bag. Um, but in that case, with the Pred Alien, it actually became a hunter of its own. But there are other interpretations of the Pred Alien that it doesn't do that. And you can write in a lot of things. You know, there's a lot to be. There's a lot of stuff that's in the expanded universe that suggests that the xenomorph um, evolutions and fusions and all of that move along sort of a very intelligent, um, needs based focus. Um, so you can easily write into your stories things that explain why they didn't happen the way they always do. Let me answer a couple more questions here. Just a second here. Yeah, there's a the Dark Horse did come out with a comic trying to tie Prometheus and Covenant into the sort of the how it fits with the other Dark Horse comics, which I think is fun. Um, thank you. All right, so protocol molecule from the Expanse is very black goo like. That's pretty fair. That also means that the Expanse, with sort of its gritty universe, could also work as an alien setting. uh Halakard, not only is this a thing, but also when they came out with Spelljammer, there's a monster in there that is uh so Spelljammer cribbed from a lot of sources intentionally, which I think was really fun. Um, but among like the various anime and stuff that they borrowed from, they did borrow also. They had an alien. They had a xenomorph in there, but instead of coming on board your ship in the chest of one of the party members, its eggs looked like gold pieces. So it would be in and amongst a treasure hoard, and then it would hatch in the belly of your ship, and it would grow and crawl around and terrorize your crew as you're stuck out in the phlogiston. Let's see. All right. Would it make sense to have your first adventure be one with the xenomorph, and then surviving characters people who experience the xenomorph can? Um, that would be a good way to run it. I think that actually might be a very smart way to run it, because then you get all of the need for a xenomorph encounter out of the way. Um, Also, I think it would build that fear that the xenomorph would show up again. It would also kind of work like a Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel in a lot of ways. You could have everybody running multiple PCs in that, in that, regular average Joe space trucker sorts in that first scenario, or even multiple members of, a Marine squad or a corporate group or whatever, and then whoever survives goes on to continue the campaign. That's actually a pretty solid idea. Uh, this has been done a few times in various Dark Horse comics, as well as some of the novelizations. I know that they even at one point created a synthetic that in the Dark Horse comics they created a synthetic that was 100% visually identical to a xenomorph, um, and he was designed for hive infiltration. So it was pretty cool. One of the best ones I like, one of my favorites is Aliens Tribes, and I don't see enough coverage for it. But it was a short story novelization with beautifully painted panels, and it introduces the idea of combat exoframes in the form of the Mox units, and has a really specialized group of soldiers, mercenaries, can't remember exactly what they were, going around specifically hunting down uh, alien hives and having a very cool way of dealing with them. Involve one, and part of that's involving having somebody intentionally getting captured and taken to the core of the hive. So no more spoilers, but that was a good one. uh yeah, it's a hard one to find hardware. uh so let's see. Echo, which sounds awesome. I'm sorry, I didn't catch what we were talking about when that came up. Um, let's see. Yeah, Tribes is awesome, and the art is just to die for. The designs for the Mox unit and they're really cool. And then later on, they would sort of cheapen it in Dark Horse Comics by coming up with other Berserker units, but they just were never as cool as that original Mox shit kicker. Um, oh, the gold pieces. No, you're fine. Yeah, it was a good idea. They borrowed a lot of really good, and they did a lot of really good interpretations. All right, so continue on with inspiring movies. Virus, much like Hardware, um, and also the aforementioned Saturn III for that matter. This is one of those sort of technology out of control sort of deals, and I could see Virus playing almost identically to how it did in the film, but on a spaceship in the alien universe. We know we're in a universe with alien species that are, there are more alien species in the alien universe besides just humans and engineers. The engineers were making weapons to fight somebody. So you have a lot of leeway when it comes up to stuff. And Virus doesn't even need to fit into the overall collective universe that you're playing. Virus could just be a signal broadcast from who knows how far away for how long ago, and it just becomes one of those mysteries like we had with the original Alien movie. And then comic hilarity ensues when stuff goes wrong on the ship. Um, so this is one of those ones where it's got a lot of wide interpretation. You could have it be a corporate thing. You could have it be, you know, something that builds into its own little arc, like, kind of like the engineers did. Personally, I this is just personal preference, but I not a huge fan of the engineers as as shown in um, Prometheus and stuff. And this could just be the fact that I had so many years with the Dark Horse comics, but the elephant aliens that are in Dark Horse, I think, are a lot more interesting than the engineers ended up being. Uh, Yeah, and this is another good suggestion here. Virus could be an attempt by one of the companies to fight back against the aliens, and it could be that. I mean, you could use the virus aspect to just be like, maybe there's an advanced AI that they tried to develop to make ships able to defend against alien incursions, and then the ship decide with its new AI decides that the humans on board are also an alien threat, and so starts trying to kill them. Um, yeah. Results of the Lochnar. All right. um, so moving on to other inspirations, Terminator. You could run scenarios where you have synthetics that are being sent out specifically to kill people. Um, or maybe there's a new corporation in town that maybe doesn't have the level of biotech that Wayland Yutani or Tyrell had, and they're using a different angle. Maybe, they're butthurt because they lost a contract to Wayland Yutani, and so they've gone ahead and made metal dudes. Maybe it's decided that, you know, they need to make some sort of hardcore metal fighting machine to go against the Xenos, instead of soft fleshy ones. Um, but because they know that aliens are smart, they make them look like people, and so these things go away. Um, so that would be another, and along that angle of technology out of control and making things to fight the aliens, screamers. Screamers is a great one. Um, Screamers can play mechanically or it can play biologically. Replace creepy, screechy uh, machines on a backwater planet with some sort of weird evolution of the xenomorph, and you've got a cool version of screamers. Maybe there are some sort of weird sand shrimp on this alien planet, or sand lobsters, something large enough for the facehuggers to get into. That is actually one thing that's interesting. Aside here, in the expanded Aliens universe, uh, they have addressed that um, the facehuggers don't work on all things. If something is too big, it can be hard for um, the all right, later, Helicar. Thanks for coming by, and hopefully you keep your power. I think it was you who just got your power back. Um, but yeah, so the facehugger size has an effect, and it's they pay attention to it more or less depending. I know in the Batman comic where he runs into a xenomorph, the crocodile xenomorph, somehow the facehugger gets onto the crocodile and doesn't kill the crocodile. Because I mean, you can imagine, like, if let's say the facehugger tries to get in the crocodile's mouth, crocodile's big, it's probably just going to bite the facehugger in half, and then it's going to dissolve because of the acid. Um, Oddly enough, this was very specifically addressed in one of the most unlikely places, and that was in the action figures. The cheesy, goofy, intended to be in a Saturday morning cartoon, after school cartoon series. Um, se- uh, in the comics that came with those action figures, they had a giant face hugger, and it's been used in a couple other places too. But these are face huggers that are large enough to where when they attack a human, their legs fit around their entire body. And the theory is that these are an evolution. Kind of going back to what I was saying a lot earlier in the stream, it seems like as they've written and expanded the universe, that some of the shapes and changes and eventual formations of the xenomorph are done intelligently for the environment they're in, and so you can kind of write off anything like with the Rinth producing human xenomorphs. It could be that it was determined that the Rinth DNA wasn't suitable for the needs to build a hive on that setting. But yeah, so if you're going to do screamers biologically, you could go ahead and have some sort of weird, desert animal that is vaguely, tadpole, bug shaped, and then it gets in there and they start screeching through the sand. Or again, you could have it to be where this was a development for anti xenomorph technology or just general warfare um, that goes out of control. You could use the movie completely unchanged because it's a movie about corporate warfare. You could use the movie completely unchanged and have it be on some planet somewhere out there, and this is just going on, and the players find themselves in that situation, or maybe that's just your one-off you're running. So let's move on here. We did Virus, did Terminator, we did Screamers. All right, so in the category of moving on from technology and gone awry, there's also the fate of dead soldiers, and that's where we get things like or synthetics and things like that. Soldier could be an alien movie, and actually I've heard some stuff say that there are hints and connections that kind of tongue in cheek, not official, placing it in other movie universes. Um, yeah, that's the Screamers is definitely one that could fit easily, but Soldier also fits because I mean Soldier is about, I mean, if you make the Soldier, um, you could the story is of course all um, child soldiers growing up junk planet backworld. There's so many elements to borrow from this to put it into the Alien universe. That big rig and the soldiers at the end, very corporate. Um, you could easily tell this story in the Alien universe and really not have to do much more than file the serial numbers off. The main decision you're going to have to put into yeah, there's that. Plus, I think some of the lingo they use, like Tannhauser gates and stuff like that, is in there as well. The main choice you're going to have to make is just how you're going to interpret the soldier. Is it a synthetic? Um, is this something that they're using to? Is there a corporate process by which they're using some of the pheromonal controls, or if you even go with the Dark Horse angle, the psychic controls that the alien queen uses to sort of manipulate, brainwash, and produce super soldiers. Yes. Pitch Black is, for all intents and purposes, an alien movie. I mean, really, it is. Um, the second movie is somebody wanted to make a Warhammer movie and couldn't get the rights. But the third movie, I think, fits well enough into the setting. The technology as presented in the first and the third are solid. Uh, I think the prison that I think it's in the second one that they have the prison um, is also solid enough to put in the Aliens universe. But yeah, the Riddick movies definitely work. You can definitely burrow just the critters. I mean, Pitch Black again. It is not a huge stretch to see those as just xenomorphs who got into the local population of whatever's and replace them. Maybe there was some batwingy thing on the planet, and then the xenomorphs got into them, and now there's just a flying xenomorph hive. And flying xenomorphs is a terrifying concept. All right, so after Soldier, we have Universal Soldier. Again, what are super soldiers? I think fit well into the Alien universe and you can tell some good stories diverting from xenomorphs through these types of characters. I think the visuals presented in Universal Soldier also lend themselves well into the Alien setting, um, because you can, high tech truck with a command post, heads up comms. All you have to do is give them M41 A1 pulse rifles instead of conventional arms or smart guns and stuff like that. Um, what happens when somehow that xenotechnology allows humans to resurrect and control the dead as super soldiers? And if you're this would be particularly effective if you're running a colonial marine campaign. um, what happens when you're out there dealing with some sort of corporate uprising or investigating, being sent to some sort of corporate thing, and you see some of your old buddies now as reanimated universal soldiers? So they could fit in pretty well, I think. um, and along those same lines, RoboCop. In this day and age, good colonial marines don't die. They just come back as super weapons to fight against Xenos. Gets past having to have that artificial intelligence or robot brain, and you know you can give them the acid resistant armor that the Mox units have, or that also they kind of touch on that first showed up in uh, uh, Aliens Genocide, where they had the armor that had the acid neutralizing chemical between the walls of the armor. Um, so that is a thing, and RoboCop could easily fit into that. Um, and a lot of these that I'm presenting are things that, of course, you're player characters are going to run into. Like, I'm not saying that it's a good idea to make one of your player characters into RoboCop or into a Universal Soldier. But I think these are good plot lines that you can put into the Alien universe that don't feel out of place. RoboCop is all about corporate overreach and greed and manipulation of the populace, and just generally speaking, corporate badness. Uh, it's almost like, the '80s gave us some collective reason to question big corporations. I'm just going to go out on a limb there. So those are movies. What about other series as you can draw from um, for inspiration? And a bit over the hour that I plan to do this one today, but I think it's worth talking about and continuing to do so. Space Above and Beyond. This is a good example of a way to run a extended military campaign in a game universe. Say what you will about why they had pilots also doing ground pounder missions and stuff. Um, there's some logic you can come up with for that. It's space, so you have your people as cross trained as you can, because, well, you never know what they're going to be running into, and how far away your next resupply is. But in the context of a ongoing military RPG campaign, Above and Beyond is a good one. You've got two enemies in this series, because they've got the AIs and then they've got the Chigs. Um, and in the course of like an alien setting, that could be two different corporations. It could be a corporation and an opposing government, because that is one thing that is canon to the Alien universe, at least the Alien RPG universe. Um, According to Free League, at least, which I do appreciate them having mined some of the extended universe. William Gibson's was it his? I can't remember the exact government he did. Basically, the Progressive Peoples, but basically his space communists um, uh, are part of the setting. So you could have the main war being between, you know, USCMC and then uh, troops from the Progressive Peoples, and then a synthetic uprising or Xenos popping up in the middle of it. But it's it presents a good example of how you can intersperse also like downtime adventures and little side adventures that allow the players to be doing things that are more than the constant fighting that you might get, which might be better served in like a miniatures game. All right. Also, Stargate. So, not exactly as translatable to the Alien universe, but it could be. So, imagine, and this is where you might be stepping way out into some new territory as far as your storytelling in the Alien universe. But the nice thing about the Alien universe is, as much as there is to it, there is a lot unsaid about it as well. The technology as presented in Prometheus and Covenant of the engineers does allow for a lot of cool ideas. And so while you may not have space gates going from planet to planet, hey Grumpy, welcome, Grumpy old Slan. And so while you wouldn't necessarily have space gates in your Aliens campaign, you could have some other technology maybe that allows some people some fast moving travel between into far reaching parts of the galaxy. I know in the Dark Horse comics, really early on, they did come up with they had a ship in there that used a new drive system that traveled faster than the rest of the ships, than the current conventional technology in the alien setting. So they were already kind of dipping a toe into that in the expanded universe. And so hey, maybe a race contemporary to the engineers or some ancient race um, leaves an artifact on a planet. Next thing you know, you got Stargate SG-1, um, and yeah, it's. I mean, Stargate Universe could also work, but I mean, all you're really doing is just trading one ancient tech for another. Um, so yes, it could work, but in the case of I do like SG-1 over Universe for this, because okay, so long-term patrol vessel. So yeah, you could do that. You could definitely play it where you have a USCMC or a corporate ship that is on a long expedition out past known space, and then the players are playing the TAC team that goes down to the planets and does all the away team stuff. That would be a fun campaign. Um, Meanwhile, you've got the constant threat of corporate overreach and what's that secret transmission going to be sent out to you from Weyland Yutani or whatever. Um, are you going to run into other Xenos or other, or the Xenomorph out there? Um, so yeah, that could be a good angle. And then lastly, the last example I had here was Sequest. Um, this would play out similar to what Justin was mentioning. Uh, and the in that this would be an exploration mission set in the Aliens universe, um, on a ship. I mean, we're not going to put it in a boat. Mages, I haven't talked about them because I'm not overly familiar with them. I've read them, I've tinkered with them by doing adventure design, and I know of them, but I don't have a lot of experience with them. I never played the Leading Edge game back in the day, um, and then uh, the new game. I do love the new Alien RPG's mechanics. I've heard some complaints that it's a little too random and that, like, you might you can run out of air by a die roll. It's not quite as cut and dry as that. I like the panic and stress rules; those are good. I do like the simplified system for skills and attributes. I think it's very cinematic. I have said it before and hold to this opinion that the Alien RPG from Free League is probably the best set of rules, um, written for a specific IP that I've ever run into. Um, Personal agendas are good. These work, I think, better in cinematic play, and that's the one thing I do. One of the other things I really do like about Free League's version is they gave you from the get go two different ways to play the game. They talk about ongoing campaigns with experience and all of that, and then they talk about one shots in their cinematic. I don't think personal agendas as written are all that great for long term play, um, because I feel that that's something best left to the players to decide and to develop, and to play out over time. Um, I know the cinematic rules, they're really good because they you're going to be playing these characters for only a short period of time, so you're not going to get a lot of time to develop and build them, or work with them and kind of put them together in your brain. So having some cliff notes up front that help point out some of their motivations and all of that really does work. Let's see. And so that's it for images. Yeah, Justin, these are some good ideas. 200 to 300 people on a ship, just NPCs. I find it interesting that in the Alien universe, they don't put a lot of people on their ships. Um, the Sulaco in Aliens always seemed like really weird that it had so few people on it, but it's only designed at most, I think, to carry like a company of guys. Um, and the standard operating unit for the USCMC is, I think, what you see in the movie, maybe twice that is what they generally send for response teams and stuff. So it's definitely an interesting universe where I think that's part of the realism of the universe, in that getting people across to the galaxy is a big endeavor. So the fewer people you can send, the better. Um, but I think if you were going to be doing, say, like a long haul um, mission, that they might come up with a way to put more people on a ship. Uh, Uh yeah, and there's also some mechanics in, I think, in the cinematic version, where those agendas can even shift from scene to scene in that scenario. So that it gets really tricky. I know that when I wrote up all the pregens for my adventures, for my scenarios for Alien, I did try to come up with pre-written connections between other characters, whether that's a positive or negative, and then also some thing that mattered specifically to that character that would motivate them. Yeah. Even with hypersleep, um, yeah, that's you still have to keep in mind, just what you're moving around. And for the aliens, for this USCMC, it seems like the priority is actually making sure that those few soldiers have the hardware they need, because I know, as far as I recall, reading on the specifications for the Sulaco, they had other vehicles and stuff on board that they could have brought down. They just didn't need them. Like there's a heavy gun that will fit in the belly of that drop ship as well. It has enough similar enough cross section to the APC that it'll fit. Um, So this has been done in the comics. They've had some mobile research stations that they're ships, but they're stations. There have also been pictures in some of the comics of USCMC battleships and larger vessels, because they do have space warfare. But if you ever read the technical specifications for the Sulaco, warfare in Aliens in space is much more of a real space war, with long range engagements, guided missiles, um, kinetic kill weapons, even using things like just net casters, throwing out nets into space to intercept munitions, sand casters, and all of that kind of real world hardcore technology. Uh, Another link between IP is that Alien does use phased plasma weapons similar to Terminator. So there's an interesting little Cameronism. Um, but yeah, so that's always fun. So got about a half an hour left. Now's the time to throw out those questions. But I hope I have laid it out enough to where, if you've ever considered running a game in the Alien universe, uh, you have enough to work with. I highly recommend um, uh, the any of the Dark Horse comics just for inspiration. The novelizations of the movies, and they've even done novelizations of the comics, like the original Dark Horse, Aliens versus Predator, the vastly superior Aliens versus Predator, has a novelization too. I think a lot of the early Dark Horse stuff got novelizations, like Earth War gets one. Because in the Dark Horse timeline, Earth got completely overrun by the xenomorphs, and then they had to fight for it and nuke it to get it back. And then they used atmosphere processors and stuff to rebuild Earth. And you even get some weird storylines where there are alien cults, xeno cults, because the alien queen in the Dark Horse comics has some sort of weird. They really were leaning into what we didn't know about the xenomorphs, and more of that kind of almost Lovecraftian horror aspect to them. In that the alien queens were transmitting uh, beacons, psychic beacons out there that were giving people on Earth nightmares, and really affecting their psychology. And then this rolls into sort of alien cults where you have sort of preachers and stuff who are the new god, and then you have the humans harnessing the aliens to work against them. For example, they had sniffer aliens, which are the ones that I was talking about that are harnessed up with the little head, headgear and stuff like that. They would actually muzzle the aliens, and they could, because you could use them to sniff out the cells and the hives. Um, they even at one point in the Dark Horse comics have human alien hybrids that are not the product of space huggers. They are actually the byproduct of, if I recall correctly, and it's been a while since I read it, um, the Xenozip royal jelly. So basically, humans who consume too much royal jelly start to go through a transformation um, into this sort of human with random alien aspects to them. So there's, yeah, I mean, you can borrow a lot of stuff, but yeah, I mean, the goal here was to, again, not talk about any particular game system. Um, Although Free League's new version is a good system to go with, and they've done a lot of work on providing you with a good, solid framework for the universe. Um, but to talk about how flexible the setting is, even though it does seem like a one-trick pony, if you're not going to put an alien in there, why are you playing aliens? And that's because there's a lot you can do. You're just it's a setting. I mean, you could make the same argument for Blade Runner. There's a Blade Runner RPG that's coming out, and I'm like, well, other than you could ask the same question, other than you know hunting replicants, what else is there to do in the Blade Runner setting? Well, it's a cyberpunk world. I mean, I know a lot of people will argue that it's not a cyberpunk setting. I would say that they are categorically wrong. Um, Hunger, I may. I'm not sure. I'm gonna need a breather after this, and I haven't even eaten breakfast yet, so I will try to come by. Uh, yeah, if you look at a lot of the production work, that's really good. Also, if you have a chance, pick up the Wayland Yutani report. I believe this was a piece of material that came out um, after Prometheus or Covenant. It was one of those sort of coffee table books that they often publish, but it is designed, it is written as an in-universe company document reporting on the xenomorph, and it kind of combines a lot of the expanding universe. Um, yeah. Um, Again, it's the setting that you can cue from, and that's the thing. I mean, we can. There are a lot of um, there are a lot of people that are, there are a lot of games that are like that. I mean, you can look at games like, I'm playing Cyberpunk, and I'm just pulling information, pulling ideas in from other universes and incorporating that. I'm playing Traveler, and I'm putting that in. But the alien setting, you can it's a broad setting. It has elements of Cyberpunk. I mean, considering Blade Runner is in the alien universe, we can only imagine what Earth and all of the other, populated planets are like. You could play a complete cyberpunk style campaign, for example, in the alien universe. Everybody, this is my brother, Gabriel. I will eat when I can. I don't get up and get going till like 10 o'clock in the morning most of the time, anyways, because I mean, my work schedule doesn't have me working until like 8:30 local time. Let's see. Yeah, I've heard a little bit about Labyrinth. I'm also going to promote. There's a great, if you haven't ever checked it out before, there's a great YouTube channel, um, which is partially responsible for me wanting to do this stream on this topic. Alien Theory is an all aliens YouTube channel that is full of good information. He deep dives into trivia and the various comic and book adaptations. He also covers Predator, but mostly it's an Alien channel. Um, really a lot of good information and covering all the different angles of the Alien universe, from toys uh, to the movies to video games. So it's a good channel. Let's see. Let's see what else we got here. No other comments. Uh, Miniatures. If you're the type of person who likes to play with miniatures for your Alien setting, um, and you have a 3D printer, uh, Papsicles is a STL producer who has an insane range of Aliens universe miniatures. He's got corporates, plus he's got cyberpunk miniatures, which you can intersperse in there. But he's got predators, he's got he's got xenomorphs, he's got different kinds of hybrids, he's got all kinds of colonial marines, including like multi-part uh, printable kits where you can assemble your own. He's got weapon sets, so you can do conversions for other miniatures. He's got synthetics, combat synthetics. He's got vehicles, both from the movies um, and from the expanded universe, and some original. Um, yeah, my goal is to actually pick up all of his Colonial Marines miniatures and just start painting them up as a collection. He's got a lot of other figures that aren't specifically for his Aliens universe that would work well for corporate troops, marshals. But yeah, Papsicles is a good one. He's got a lot of good stuff. Also, if you like Rogue Trooper and some other, the 2080 comics type characters, he does a lot of stuff like that too. And he has a Patreon, even though I'm not part of his Patreon. I was for a while when I was collecting Cyberpunk miniatures, but I have to limit the number of Patreons I back. So, let's see. Yeah, I may hit you up there, but I know you're printing a lot of stuff for other folks too, so I'm a little loath to always hit up all my printer friends. I don't have a space for a printer yet, but I have. I mean, if I was really asking for everything that I wanted to print, you guys would have no time to print your own stuff, because I've got many irons in the fire, probably too many irons in the fire. Um, yeah, so there's that. I'm gonna try and find a picture of the aliens. Those were cool. Um, Honestly, if you ever want to look at some cool images, try and find Neil Blomkamp's art that he had commissioned for uh, his proposed alien movie that he wanted to do, because he was expanding on the universe um, in his own way. He was actually building off of the first two movies and ignoring the stuff that came out after that. But yeah, I can't seem to find the picture, but that's too bad. It's a great picture, and it's a nice full color pic. But uh, but yeah, so we are at an hour and 30. We made it up to about 14, 15 people today. I'm at that point of the stream where basically everything will be a ramble because I ran out of my point. I ran out of talking points. I think if I was to say a couple other bits, when you're doing if you're going to do a campaign in the Alien universe, just remember the main themes. It's a corporate world. It's a spread out, sparsely populated universe. Um, it often plays on resource scarcity and isolation, no matter what's going on, even in the action things. I mean, if you look at Aliens, despite them having all of that hardware, they're immediately cut off and put in a resource scarce, isolated situation. Even though they have all the big guns, um, they lose most of their supplies. They're stuck on the planet. they're in a limited environment. So those are key things to also consider when you're running your games. Um, if you start to stray too far from those, um, you may lose the feel of the alien universe. But it's also easy to course correct. If you were, for example, to come into a situation where things were just getting a little too happy, um, something can break. Or maybe that's when the alien comes in. If you're starting to run into a situation where you're running out of solid ideas to run, then maybe that's the time you put the xenomorph in your campaign. Um, and also keep in mind the universe, the stock universe. Um, yeah, that's another thing. That there's that they have a doom clock also. That's a good way to add things in as well. Doom clocks work really well. Um, it is also possible. I kind of opened up by saying there's two ways to play this, and that's like the Xeno specific game and the kind of open game. But you can definitely run both of them. The default universe of Alien is a universe where the cat is out of the bag. The xenomorph has gotten out there. It's around. If not the xenomorph itself, then the engineer's technology is out there. The pathogen is in places. People are playing with the pathogen. Um, so you can run your regular, I'll call it work a day kind of campaign, and have the people run into those things frequently. And really, you wouldn't be shorting yourself. You wouldn't be cheating. You wouldn't be remiss in doing so because that is the universe. So, I mean, it might get a little tiresome constantly fighting aliens, but if the aliens are showing up frequently, or the pathogen, or pathogen created mutants, um, other weapons of the engineers. I mean, we've seen the black goo, but you can extrapolate from that. We know that the human world in Alien is a corporate world, corporate ruled world with competing factions, corporations that are trying to outdo one another and have different ideas about how they're going to do things. There's nothing to say that the engineers' outlook was universal, or accepted by the whole species. In fact, there's some evidence in both Prometheus and Covenant that that was not true. That there were different viewpoints amongst the engineers, um, as to how they were approaching their problems. So it could be that there are other technologies out there, kind of going back to some of the other suggestions, like the virus or things like that. Different ways that the engineers were working to solve their problems, and other aspects of their culture and their society, that could create really cool aspects for your campaign. What is it that the engineers were terrified of that caused them to create these super doom weapons of mass destruction? It could be that they were just, you know, they were the top predator in the dark forest, that is the galaxy. Or it could be that there is some big bad out there that they were terrified of. I mean, you know, you can create other aspects. I know, like Dark Horse had a couple of instances where they showed the alien homeworld, their version of the alien homeworld, where the aliens were not the top predators. They were from an ecosystem where they were a predator, but there were things that would like sneak up and eat them, and eat their eggs. There's even one tongue-in-cheek comic that shows a humanoid alien species with alien eggs in cartons in a grocery store, um, which was ridiculous. But at the same time, you could you could play with that. There's one Dark Horse comic. I can't remember the name of it, but it takes place in the 50s, and a flying saucer type, spaceship crashes, and on board is a humanoid alien, and he is implanted with an egg, or with an embryo, and it hatches out, and it's got his physical characteristics. So there is already built in there. They talk about Arcturans and like, was it the one that when the Arcturans are like a weird kind of burrowing beetle type of a thing that's on one planet. But in some of the banter between the Marines, they're talking about some alien race that you can't tell the men from the women. I can't remember what it was exactly. And and it sounds like that the way they're talking about them, it sounds like they were a humanoid species that mankind may have run into. So it's very possible that the aliens universe has other intelligent life in them. We already know there's the predators or the Yautja, whatever you want to call them. I don't like the name Yautja. I mean, it's the name that came up with them for them officially, but I just always call them predators. But they're out there. The engineers are out there. Um, so who else is out there? And you just run with it. Let's see. Unused alien pyramid designed by Giger was inspired by egg cartons. Wouldn't surprise me. That guy was definitely a wonderful nut of a man who had some crazy ideas. Amazing artist. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna give a couple more minutes here. If anybody has any questions, now is the time to throw them out there. Questions, comments, um, and then I'm gonna call the stream. If you haven't already joined the Discord, I have a Discord for Elfbait. There's also an Elfbait Facebook group. The links will be in the description if they're not already there on this video. If not, they're in the other videos, the other previous streams. By all means, come by, join up, and talk amongst yourselves there. Let's see. Yeah, Earth Angel is the one that I was. Yeah, you're right. Earth Angel is the one that's in the 50s, and that it's not a particularly interesting aliens comic. I think honestly, they just wanted to write a 1950s story with a flying saucer. Um, but I don't think there's anything wrong with just the simple, basic formula of people in a situation, insert xenomorph. I think you can rinse and repeat that over and over and have it continue to be interesting and worth playing just by changing the circumstances. Sorry you're late. No, there's no late. Um, the nice thing about streams is that they then go onto the channel and you can always comment. Um, yeah, I mean, work's distracting you from the important things. I understand that as well. I also work a job where I have the ability to kind of keep a stream on or a video on in the background. Um, but yeah, work comes first. Uh, there on the Discord that I mentioned just a moment ago, I did write an article on creating character backstories for alien characters, and some of my thoughts on what makes for a good solid alien character. And I guess I can kind of reiterate that here. Um, yeah, the Arcturians are the burrowing nightmares that come up in seasonal migrations. So for the characters in Alien, I think it's really basically if you're writing a character backstory, and I'm not a huge fan of giant backstories. Um, the key thing I do is I write about basically three paragraphs. One is where you came from and who you are. Um, the second one is what brought you to where you are now, and the third one is what your immediate goals are in the backstory, what brings you up. So it's like your early childhood and early development in a nutshell, the kind of the early framework of your character. Not always childhood. Sometimes the childhood is glanced over. You had a typical corporate upbringing, and then this. Uh, what changed in your life, and then what you are doing right now as gameplay goes to change that. So, for example, I have a colonial marine character in one of my scenarios. He's the only Colonial Marine on the station because he's actually just there as the babysitter for a Marine supply base. He joined USCMC, um, and then you and he ended up getting put on basically desk duty. So his day in and day out is cataloging, doing his daily reports, maintaining and stuff. And so that is his background, his current, and then his current day to day. And his big deal now is that he's just looking for a chance to really prove himself as a Marine. And so as the scenario starts, he will be key in the game, in the scenario, as the guy who has the keys to the candy shop as far as weapons and equipment goes, because there's a Marine supply base there with weapons, ammo, potentially even a vehicle and stuff like that. Um, but also he's the one with military training. There's a corporate person on board who he doesn't get along with. There's basically the head of corporate security, and then there are marshals. But he also has ties to one of the marshal's deputies. They both go to the range and you know hang out. But in the backgrounds, it's like, where did you come from? Who are you now? And what changed to bring you to what you're doing? Let's see. Always wondered what Xeno implanted in the Blade Runner 2049 replicants, as they are now more human, can give birth. I think the key there would be, are they in? So Blade Runner replicants, I believe, would be able to be hosts even in the original. You don't have to have reproductive organs to host a xenomorph. Um, you just have to have, uh, and this is also why I think that Dark Horse thought it was a safe assumption uh, have uh, to have the synthetics be able to at least decoy and trick the facehuggers, because the whole idea in Dark Horse is that the synthetics would have, they smelled like humans, they acted like humans because they themselves didn't even know they were synthetics, and so the facehuggers wouldn't be able to tell, and they would attack, they would implant, but then there'd be no place for the the embryo to develop so they could capture it. In fact, they think they may have even actually had built-in stasis, like stasis units, because in Aliens, the facehuggers that are in the lab are in stasis tanks, and so they have stasis technology in addition to the cryosleep technology. Um, but replicants, the replicants themselves, um, were always biological enough to where I think that they would. I don't think a facehugger would bat an eye at going after one of them, because it would still they would still smell like living things. Uh, Synthetics aren't from the Tyrell Corporation, as far as I know, in Dark Horse. It's they're still replicants. Synthetics are actually from Weyland-Yutani. They're competing technologies. In fact, Weyland-Yutani, in his writing, in his memo, actually makes fun of Tyrell for playing God and trying to create actual living creatures instead of making synthetics that just copy life. Yeah, so the standard synthetics in Alien can get around the aliens. Bishop actually, yeah, in the aliens, that's Bishop. He's actually talking about it, because as long as he doesn't pose a threat, he's not. There's no draw. There's no reason for the xenomorphs to go after him. In the Dark Horse comics, they had specially engineered uh, synthetics that they had made for the sole purpose of bringing back captured alien embryos. Um, they had pheromones and all of that stuff. Um, let's see. So going back to this is also pretty much your magic golden ticket to write anything hostile life form wise into Alien. I think that's the other thing too is if you're dealing with other alien worlds, there's no reason you can't have other hostile life forms that pose similar or even different threats than the xenomorph itself. If you've ever seen Europa Report, which is another good movie, it's kind of designed more as a real space movie, but in Europa Report, there's an alien life form on the planet that I don't. As far as the movie shows, I don't think it's ever actually hostile. I think it's just curious and doing animal things. But yeah, it causes problems for them. But that's also a very much an environmental situation, which can make for a good adventure. If you have thinking players who like to work with problems, you don't always have to have them being attacked by something or fighting something. You can have the environment itself be a worthwhile adventure. When you know a chunk of the spaceship explodes because of some sort of compression issue, and they're losing oxygen. Um, and they're having to deal with stuff that can be a fun enough adventure. It becomes more entertaining when you can throw in some sort of X card. Okay, so the players are playing space truckers, they're transporting things, there is a routine, can happen to anybody, technical problem with their ship, but one of their passengers or one of the crew is particularly perturbed or seems overly rushed or overly concerned with what should just be a routine fix, that can lead to all sorts of stuff. You could end up having it revealed that he had stowed away um, some sort of hardware or a xeno egg, or maybe in a cargo pod is you know somebody in cryosleep carrying an embryo. So those situations also make for really good scenario fodder as well. But the basics. I mean, mm, I think not Covenant, Prometheus shows that you can have a dungeon crawl that is in the alien universe. Literally, they find a strange structure. They go in. There are hazards and encounters and some puzzles, magic flutes and weird holographic images that show ancient lore, strange carvings on the wall. If any of you have played D&D, we've seen those all. So I mean, Covenant's a dungeon crawl. There, I said it. Uh, AE35 can always fail. Yeah. Um, that's the thing. There's, I think, the first Alien movie demonstrates that very well. Part of the problem they have in the first Alien movie is when the Nostromo lands, they damage one of their struts. That is just some icing to add tension to this to the story. You know, it's the hyperdrive going when you're trying to escape the star destroyers. It's it just adds to the story, and you can throw those things in there. Um, that's one of the things about Free League system. One of the things that people complain about is the things like power and ammo and air are all done with die thresholds, and instead of tracking individual rounds and the like. Um, and it's been complained that, or some of the complaints have said that, well, that just makes it random when you run out of ammo, or when you run out of oxygen, or when you run out of power. It's not true, but what it does do is it adds tension. And tension is hard to replicate in actual play. It's just like with Call of Cthulhu drink, that the sanity mechanic is there to replicate that tension and that doom clock that otherwise just playing a scenario can't replicate. It's very difficult and nigh impossible to get an actual fear tension response from players sitting around a table eating chips and cracking jokes and stuff, and trying to get gamers to not act like gamers is an uphill battle, and it's not one that I want to fight. But doom clocks and thresholds are a great way to simulate that. With Free League's Alien RPG, you've got you've got the stress mechanic, and then stress can lead to panic. Panic is contagious and can cause stress in other people, which can then lead to other panic. And we've seen that in the movies. Let's just look at like the Marines and Aliens, how their stress level increases, and then somebody loses it, and next thing you know, everybody's losing it. And that's in the system as written. That's when you start rolling for those threshold numbers. Routine operation doesn't really cost you much. And so it doesn't really require you to make any rolls, or at least not hardcore rolls. So you're not going to be rolling your oxygen level just walking around doing basic repairs in your spacesuit or in your pressure suit on the alien planet. If you get in a fight or are forced to flee or you panic, then you're going to be rolling those thresholds because you're not going to be managing those resources properly. That's the assumption. And the fact that that can happen then allows the players to build stress, and it kind of elicits that response in the players because they can see that doom clock ticking down. They can see those thresholds. So even if you're not using Free League's game, the nice thing is those mechanics are perfectly easy to just lift into any other game. But if you're going to be playing another game, like say like Mothership has a stress system built into it. If you're going to be playing in the Alien universe, find some way to turn stress and doom clocks, time frames, things like that, taking timers into game mechanics that players can be very aware of. Um, in fact, if you're going to use like a doom clock, having an actual physical representation on the table can really help. If even if that's just like your giant four-sided die or a giant six-sided die that you're just clicking over and give it those nifty little like green glowing monochrome screen symbols, numbers like you had in the Alien movie that they can see as the countdown. I mean, how many parts of the Alien movies, of Alien and Aliens especially, are made so much more stressful just because we have a lot of flashing lights and sirens and the automated voice of Mother talking in the background. Um, just yeah, build those up. Whether that's the aggro station on the water planet is slowly filling with water. Deep Blue Sea. Deep Blue Sea could be turned into an alien movie, because what if you're on an on an alien planet? In fact, one of the issues of Colonial Marines, the Colonial Marines comic from Dark Horse, had aquatic aliens that had clearly hybridized with some sort of big prawn type of a thing. But imagine like Deep Blue Sea, you're on a research station. It's on a water planet. There's they're farming kelp was what they were doing in the Colonial Marines comic. Maybe it's they're researching toxins from fish or whatever it is that they're doing. Something goes wrong. It's filling with water. Now your aquatic aliens are getting in through holes in the hull, and they're swimming around, and the available space is shrinking. Um, the current one of the newer movies, Underwater. You could turn that into an alien movie. But I think I've stated. I think I made my point. I hope I made my point. Uh, Again, you guys got me rambling, but that was cool because we're now at that 2 hour mark. And at this point, I'm going to have to call it Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I really appreciate uh, the growing number of people who are tuning into my streams. I'm going to continue to bounce them back and forth between Sundays and Mondays. I get different people on different days, and that allows some people to attend who may not have been able to before. Keep an eye out. I'm still going to do impromptu streams. Those are done when I have an idea and when I just have some time to kill. Um, I'm still working on episodes, and hopefully you are now inspired to go out and play some alien stuff, and maybe in the future I'll even get to run a alien game online or something. But with that, everybody have a great day. Get out and game.